Thanks, Chris, and thank you all. So to take up 15 minutes of your valuable time, I thought I'd try and at least be a little bit provocative and stimulate some conversations. And I'm going to start by saying CSR isn't really a word that we use within Shell, so I'll say that now. But if I give a little bit of a journey over what I see as a small part in a large cog in this evolving approach to corporations tackling a range of social or developmental issues, and some of the challenges we experience and some of the opportunities that I see offer themselves up in a broader community sense. First of all, if I start, imagine us back in the year 2000 with, and secondly, I'm deeply worried by what is going to be shown as a caricature. I've noticed all these pictures. I'm probably more worried about the picture at the end of the day than anything else. But anyway, back in 2000, I think we felt there were some hard truths, which I will offer up to you, which you can either agree with or not agree with. First of all, I think we came from, and my background is as an entrepreneur and then working in the development agency, is that by and large, development hasn't worked. It hasn't gone to scale. So let's take that as hard truth number one, or inconvenient truth number one. Second, that I would say foundations as a whole, but particularly corporate foundations, have grossly squandered their resources in this area by giving away in ways that haven't led to scale. And I say, I represent a corporate foundation. I think our industry, our sector has been grossly dismal in its performance in this area. Often driven by short-term PR benefits without longer-term added value. So that will be a second hard truth for me. Thirdly, I come from a background where I genuinely don't think that the solution to many problems is giving money. It is more around linking people, building skills and capacity that makes a difference. Money is necessary but not sufficient. And yet many of the foundation models, particularly in the corporate world, were based on giving money. And I think as a starting point, we felt that was the wrong model to approach. So, and picking up on the point that we clearly want these presentations to avoid being seen as marketing efforts, I don't really want to, in my short time with you, dwell too much on us as an institution, but I'd like to use us as an example of how we've tried to, in our small and hopefully humble way, to rise to some of these challenges and restructure how we deploy our assets, both skills, finance and leverage to the group to make more of a difference. Secondly, we have promoted this concept of enterprise-based solutions, which is actually in the title for this session. So I want to just dwell a little bit by what we mean by enterprise-based solutions. And then thirdly, sitting where I do with inside one corporate in a large sector, where do I see the trends going with regard to how corporates and businesses will engage in development issues in the future? So those are the three things I hope to cover. Now, working for a high-tech company means I can never understand how to work technology. Are the slides on? How do I turn them on? Okay. All right. So while I'm waiting for the first slide to come up, just a brief background to the Shell Foundation. We were set up in the year 2000 through a donation of $250 million from Shell. So our sole funding comes from within the Royal Dutch Shell group of companies. And as I said, we deliberately took as a starting point the fact that we would focus only on issues aligned to the business footprint of our parent. So for us, that means tackling energy poverty issues, energy environment issues, and clearly as a global multinational, how do we address the opportunity side of globalization? So from the outset, we said, well, we won't fund all the usual good causes that are out there and that are very deserving of support, but don't have that alignment to the footprint of the group. Thank you very much. So I think, again, given the highly sceptical world quite rightly, that we live in, the words Shell and Foundation take people down a number of avenues of thought. It was decided from the outset quite correctly that we would have a mixed governance board. So whilst the CEO of Shell is the chairman of my trustees, and I have the three most senior executives in Shell on my board, which concentrates the mind, we also have three very eminent externals, so to give a mixed governance perspective, which I think is fundamentally important to us being an independent yet linked organisation. I'm not here in any shape or form to generate business value for my parent at all. And I think in rising to these challenges, we felt from the outset that let's try and identify in those areas linked to the areas of expertise and knowledge of the parent, sustainable solutions to a few key challenges that can be taken to scale and replicated. That was our mantra, and I guess the acid test against which people can judge whether we have or haven't succeeded. Now, part of our mission statement, right from the outset, enshrined the way that we would achieve these goals was through enterprise-based approaches. Now, back in the year 2000, this was a relatively new term. I think now, pleasingly, a lot of other people are using it, certainly in terms of a statement, whether or not in practice, but it is now a more commonly accepted approach. It most certainly wasn't back in the year 2000. And to some extent, my own board had reservations about this. This was one challenge we had. It is far easier to be philanthropic and give money away to good causes than do things that actually fundamentally do link and play in the grey space between development and business. But let me try and, this speaking at this event actually forced me to try and define what do we mean by enterprise-based solutions, because it's clearly part of our daily bread and butter, so we tend to assume it all as business people. And I've listed down 10 here, and I won't dwell too much on them, but first of all, any good business is good because it focuses on what it can do well. So for the starting point, enterprise-based solution for me is focus. And I have an allergic reaction to the word project, let me tell you now. I think the world is littered with short-term grant-based projects that I think have very little value. So the whole logic for us was focus on scalable initiatives. Then, again, I'm a little bit allergic to being too democratic about this, in that we have taken a very deliberate path to select the partners that we want to work with, and I'll talk through some of the challenges that entails. So we don't openly solicit proposals to us. We very much proactively find who we want to work with. And key to that is the expectation that they will share a degree of risk with us. I fundamentally would not entertain 100% grant support to anyone. I want there to be an incentive framework from the outset that motivates everyone to perform and succeed. We clearly, like any business, would go through a phase development, incubate, and then pilot, then ultimately scale up. Going back to the concept of more than money, for me, the real value of business in general is that it understands markets, it understands how to get product to market, it understands slick processes to make that efficient, it understands cash flow management, all the areas of what I would call the business DNA that needs to be shared in the development space and with those who have strong development DNA and understand the target market. So how do we share business advice? A shift from grant funding to earned income. I think it is fundamentally important if one is providing a service or a product to a market, if that market values it, it should start paying for it, whether in whole or part. So again, fundamental to us is shifting to earned income. Performance incentives, clearly, obviously. Where appropriate, can we act as a benign parasite, crudely, and suck out the goodness of the corporate in which we sit, the business skills, the business tools, the brand, etc., but clearly for our benefit and our partners' benefit. This issue of triple bottom line sustainability, fundamental to us is we all accept environmental and social sustainability. Fundamental to us is financial viability. I find that typically slightly neglected or put third. For us, it's core, it's an element and fundamentally important to go into scale. It's showing that things can be done in cost-efficient, financially viable ways, measuring impact, etc., and having an exit strategy. I think one of the problems that has plagued the corporate world is getting into social investment schemes with no exit strategy and creating a whole series of dependencies and risks that actually come back and bite the corporate in more ways than ever it was intended to, and therefore create a legacy of problems rather than a legacy of solutions. So that's a little bit about us. Now, so just to conclude on us, because I don't want to slip into this marketing side, what we've done through that process is really target 5 areas, all that are now at varying stages of sustainability and scale. And each of them is really with one key strategic partner that we have selected. So one of them that has achieved greatest sustainability and scale is our support to small enterprises, small and growing businesses in Africa. How do you provide the business skills and the access to capital to enable the startup and growth of entrepreneurs in Africa? We've done it in a way that is financially viable. Our partner, Growfin, an African partner, now has $250 million under management. It's self-financing. It represents the largest source of skills and finance support to the small and growing business sector in Africa. So there is a model now that has gone through that mill, and I think is now standing on its own feet, has very reputable investors supporting the growth, and we're talking to the commercial sector now who are coming on. That, to my mind, is in institutionalising a new model for tackling a development challenge, job creation principally. We have a partnership with WRI on the sustainable cities. How do we improve transport in growing cities around the world? Principally, that means getting people out of cars onto public transport, which might sound counterintuitive who my parent is, but very much related to the overall drive to improve efficient use of resources. Again, that's going through a scale-up phase at the moment. We have a partnership with a US-based not-for-profit on bringing to market improved cook stoves that help women and children reduce impacts to indoor air pollution, the 4th largest killer of women and children in the world. Again, an energy-related issue, but we're doing it in a market-based way, again, going to scale. And I won't talk too much about the others. What I will say, for each of those 4 partners, on reflection, in every case, we had to either co-found or co-create or bring into a market space someone new to this area. All our work with the existing entities servicing these markets led us to believe, and I'll be controversial, none were fit to go to scale, or none had the business competence to do it at scale. So we've been forced really to look in a very creative way, almost pre-venture capital. You're having to create the partner in which you can then take an early stage risk. And I think that's one of the fundamental blockers in going to scale in many of these market areas, that there are not the fit for scale partners out there who readily lend themselves to others dumping money into to take them to that next stage of growth. Now, why do I think this is interesting, and why do I think others are building on what we and others are doing, is because in a very simplistic way, the traditional project-based philanthropic model of essentially giving small amounts of money over a time-limited period, I have no idea why people got fixated on 3 years, but somewhere in mythology that was the defined time period that you gave money for, leads to my mind to, in broad terms, a non-scalable, pretty much non-sustainable type of solution, which to be critical of my own sector, would call typical corporate social investment. And it creates a whole legacy of dependency and risk issues. I think it's also typical of a lot of how other foundations have worked. I think it's also typical of how donors in the past used to work as well. The shift to me is going up that arrow to the top right-hand corner, which for me will happen when you start working with strategic partners. It's a partnership concept. It's not a project. It's not a contract type relationship. You are sharing whatever values allows that partner to grow. And in so doing, because you're enshrining principles of financial viability as well as social and environmental performance, you are leveraging in capital from other sources, which means that they can go to scale and progressively tap into what I would, again, to be controversial, call the real money markets as opposed to the play money markets that folk like me represent. So that, to my mind, is fundamentally where I think an enterprise-based approach allows one to progress up more towards that top right-hand corner of scale and sustainability. At the same time, I think from a business perspective, if I look at Uncle Shell now, where the shift is to say, actually, from a business value perspective, you are likely to generate far more value if you actually focus on issues and partners that are aligned to your area of expertise and competence, and in a partnering way. So you essentially move the other way around. You move from sponsorship. If I think of my own company funding golf classics, etc., I mean, great for getting the brand out there, but quite frankly, what is the impact of it? You move away from sponsorship, good causes, increasingly down to that sweet spot where you are finding partners to work with you in areas that you have knowledge and market influence on, and together you are then coming up with solutions. And that, to my mind, is a far more interesting and productive way in which business as a whole can enter the development space, whereas historically business was over there and the development sector was over here. And that, to my mind, represents a co-joining of what I would term business DNA, understanding markets and products and cost efficiencies, with development DNA. How do you package this in a way that is best suited to the target market and all the networks and social interactions that often the not-for-profit sector has? So that, to my mind, is the shift. Now, where that then leads me to is, and as I say, we're just a small part of a large cog in Shell, is a fundamental shift that I think we have played a role in. Is that Shell now looks at us to think, hang on a minute, this way of working is far more impactful and beneficial than our traditional way of giving money to address social issues. Therefore, hang on a minute, shouldn't we try and replicate and copy some of this? And my hunch is, if I have a crystal ball, that over the next 5-10 years, the corporate sector as a whole will gradually shift away from its low impact for high risk social investment strategy towards recognizing that the greatest value that business can bring to bear on development is its knowledge and not its money. And therefore I think that will fundamentally affect the legions of people who send in requests to corporate saying, please, can I have some? Because the answer will be no, unless we can offer something other than money to help you. Secondly, there will be more of a focus on issues related to the core business. So I think in the pharma sector that will naturally take down to health issues, IT, so I'm just using the energy company as an example on the energy side. I think that alignment will happen. I think this enterprise-based approach will materialise more, and more corporates will start realising that their business value is a major strength and an opportunity that they bring to bear. I think there will be a shift away from project funding to partners, longer-term strategic partnerships, where you are really working closely with people to try and understand how best to deploy whatever resources you both have to tackle that particular problem. And I think there will be an increasing recognition that before you enter anything, you've got to work out how to get out of it, which again will take you away from simply providing grant funding and looking at a wider range of financial instruments to facilitate that exit strategy. Where does that leave organisations like corporate foundations? I mean, I sincerely hope the scorecard for corporate foundations, in my view, goes up from low performance to actually shifting towards being incubators in this process. As I say, I started with the concept, I genuinely didn't really like corporate foundations. I now find myself managing one. I now find in hindsight that the luxury actually of having some resources and some space and some patient capital to innovate allows me and my team to come up with solutions that I think if we were part of the business would be very much more difficult. So in many ways I think foundations as a whole should be looking to take more structured early stage risk, should be using their networks to find partners that they can work with, and should be playing that incubation role in ways not just linked to their parent. I mean, for me, working with Chevron, Exxon, BP, quite frankly, I'm uninterested. I would hope that my parent is smart enough to work out that they should look to seize what we've done and take it forward. But there's no defined allegiance from my side in that respect. But if you can shift foundations to being early stage risk takers adopting a venture capital type approach, focusing down on issues, then I think at the end of the day, you will get far more sustainable and scalable solutions as a result. And indirectly, I think not only will there be greater brand value, but I think the business will fundamentally understand the markets in which it's operating in a far better and more effective way and generate a set of relationships that are stronger and more viable for the future than they have at the moment. And I'll end at that point. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.